Muktanandaya Gurave Shishya Samsara Harine Bhaktakarye Kadehaya Namaste Chitsaratmane Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. Spanda Karikas, Section 1, Swarupa Spandaha. We laud that Shankara by whose mere
opening and shutting of the eyes of consciousness
there is the appearance and dissolution of the world, and who is the source of the glorious powers of the collective whole of the Shaktis. Yasyonmesha nimeshabhyam jagata pralayodaya tam shakti chakra vibhava prabhavam shankaram stumaha. Verse 2. Inasmuch as nothing can veil his nature, there cannot be his obstruction anywhere, in whom all this world rests, and from whom it has come forth. Yatra sthitam idam sarvam karyam yasmacha nirgatam tasyanavrittarupatvan na nirodhosti kutrachit. Verse 3. Even though differing states like waking, etc., occur, in which, however, that Spanda principle remains identically the same, that Spanda principle never departs from its own nature as the identical experient in all the differing states. Jagradadi vibhedepi tadabhinne prasarpati nivartate nijanaiva swabhavadupalabdritaha. Verse 4. I am happy, I am miserable, I am attached. These and other cognitions have their being, evidently, in another in which the states of happiness, misery, etc. are strung together. Aham sukhi cha dukhi cha raktascha ityadi samvidaha sukhadyavastanusyute vartante nyatra tasputam. Verse 5. Wherein neither pain nor pleasure, nor object nor subject exists, nor wherein does even insentiency exist. That, in the highest sense, is the Spanda principle. Na dukkam na sukham yatra na graham grahakam na chasti muddha bhavopi tadasti paramartataha. Verses 6 and 7. That principle should be examined with great care and reverence by which this group of senses, though insentient, acts as a sentient force by itself, and along with the inner group of senses goes towards objects, takes pleasure in their maintenance, and withdraws into itself, because this natural freedom of it prevails everywhere. Yata karannavargoyam vimudho mudhavat swayam sahantarena chakrena pravritti stiti samriti labhate tat prayatnena pariksham tattvamadurat yata swatantrata tasya sarvatreyam akritrima. Verse 8. The empirical individual cannot drive the goad of desire, but by coming in contact with the power of the self, he becomes equal to that principle. Nahi chano danasyayam prerakattvena vartate apitvatma balasparshat purushas tatsamo bhavet. Verse 9. When the perturbation of that empirical individual who is incapacitated by his own impurity and is attached to actions disappears, then the highest state appears. Nija shuddhya samarthasya kartavyeshvabhilashinaha yada kshobha praliyeta tadasyat paramam padam. Verse 10. Then will flash forth his innate nature characterized by cognition and activity, by which he, the experient, then knows and does all that is desired by him. Tadasya kritrimo dharmo gyatva kartritva lakshanaha yatastadepsidam sarvam janati cha karoti cha. Verse 11. How can this accursed way of life and death be his any longer, who stands struck with amazement as he observes that nature, that spanda which presides over all the activities of life? Tam adhishta tribhavena swabhavam avalokayan smayamana ivasteyas tasyayam kusriti kutaha. Verses 12 and 13. Mere non-existence cannot be an object of contemplation, nor can it be said that there is no stupefaction in that state, because on account of the application of backward reference, it is certain that it, the experience of stupefaction, was there in that state. Hence, that artificial object of knowledge is always like sound sleep. It is not in this manner, as a state of recollection, that the Spanda principle is known. Na bhavo bhavyatameti nacha tatrastya mudhata yato biyoga samsparshat tadasiditti nischaya atastakritrimam geyam saushupta padavat sada natvevam smaryamanatvam tattatvam pratipadyate. Verses 14, 15, and 16. Of this Spanda principle, two states are spoken about, of the doer or the subject and the deed or the object. Of these two, the deed or the object is subject to decay, but the doer or subject is imperishable. In the samadhi of void, only the effort which is directed towards objectivity disappears. It is only a fool who on the disappearance of that effort thinks, I have ceased to be. There can never be the disappearance of that inner nature which is the abode of the attribute of omniscience in the event of the non-perception of anything objective. Avastha yugalam chatra karyakartritva shabditam karyatakshaini tatra kartritvam punarakshayam Karyonmukha prayatno ya kevalam sotra lupyate tasmin lupte vilupto smitya buddha pratipadyate natu yantar mukho bhava sarvagyatva gunaspadam tasya lopa kadachit syadanyasya nupalambhanat. Verse 17. The fully enlightened has always and incessantly the undeviating knowledge of the self in all the three states. The other one, the partially enlightened, has it only at the beginning and end of each state. Tasyo palabdhi satatam tripadavya bicharini nityam syat suprabuddhasya tadadyante parasyatu. Verse 18. The all-pervading Lord, possessed of the supreme power in the form of knowledge and knowable, object of knowledge, appears in the two states of waking and dream as knowledge and objects of knowledge, and in the other than these two only as consciousness. Jnana gyeya swarupinya shakta paramaya yuta padadvaye viburbhati tadanyatra tu chinmaya. Verse 19. The particular emanations of Spanda which begin with the gunas and which acquire their existence by having recourse to the generic Spanda can never stand in the way of the one who has realized his essential nature. Gunadispanda nishyanda samanya spanda samshrayat labdhatma labha satatam syurgyasya paripantinaha. Verse 20. These, the gunas, etc., however, intent on veiling their real nature, push the people of unawakened intellect into the terrible ocean of transmigratory existence from which it is difficult to pull them out. Aprabuddha diyastvete swastitisthaganodhyataha patayanti duruttare ghore samsara vartmani. Verse 21. Therefore, one should always be on the alert for the discernment of the Spanda principle. Such a person attains his essential nature as Spanda even in the waking condition in a short time. Atta satatam udhyukta spanda tattva viviktaye jagradeva nijam bhavam achirena adhigachyati. Verse 22. In that state is the Spanda principle firmly established, to which a person is reduced when he is greatly exasperated, or overjoyed, or is an impasse reflecting what to do, or is running for life. Ati kridha prahrishto va kim karomi iti va mrishan dhavan va yat padam gachet tatra spandha pratishtita. Verses 23, 24, and 25. Taking firm hold of that, Spanda, the awakened yogi remains firm with the resolution, I will surely carry out whatever it will tell me. Resting on the experience of that Spanda, both prana, surya, and apana, chandra, get merged in the sushumna, and by the upward path of sushumna, they rise up to the great ether of universal consciousness by abandoning the sphere of the body together with the Brahmarandra, and are completely dissolved in it. There the unenlightened yogi, by considering that state a kind of deep sleep, remains stupefied, while the one who is not covered with the darkness of infatuation is established in that ether of universal consciousness and abides as fully enlightened. Yam avastam samalambya yadayam mamavakshati tadavasyam karishyeham itti samkalpya tishtati. Tamasrityardvamargena chandrasuryavubhavapi saushumne dvanyastamito hitva brahmanda gocharam. Tada tasmin mahavyomni pralina shashi bhaskare saushupte padavan mudha prabuddha syadana vrittaha. Section 2. Sahaja Vidyodaya. Verses 1 and 2. Resorting to that power of Spanda Tattva, the divinities, mantra, etc., together with the sacred formula which serve as their indicators, being endowed with the power of omniscience, proceed to carry out their assigned functions toward the embodied ones, just as the senses of the embodied ones, by resorting to this power of Spanda, proceed to carry out their specific functions. Freed of all limitations of office, after having performed their assigned duties, Niranjanaha, their denotation as particular deities having ceased, Shantarupaha, they get dissolved together with the mind of their devotees in that very Spanda principle. Hence they are of the nature of Shiva. Tada kramya balam mantra sarvagya balashalinaha pravartante dhikaraya karanani vadehinam tatraiva sampraliyante shantarupa niranjana saharadhakka chittena tenaiti shivadharminaha. Verses 3 and 4. Since the limited individual self is identical with the whole universe, inasmuch as all entities arise from him, and because of the knowledge of all subjects, he has the feeling of identity with them all. Hence, whether in the word, object, or thought, there is no state which is not Shiva. It is the experient himself who always and everywhere abides in the form of the experienced. That is, it is the divine himself who is the essential experient, and it is he who abides in the form of the universe as his field of experience. Yasmat sarva mayo jiva sarva bhava samudbhavat Tatsamvedana rupena tadatmya pratipattita. Tasmat chabdartha chintasu na savasthana yashiva. Bhoktavya bhogya bhavena sada sarvatra samstitaha. Verse 5. Or he who has this realization of identity of his self with the whole universe, being constantly united with the divine, views the entire world as the play of the self identical with Shiva, and is liberated while alive. There is no doubt about this. Iti vayasya samvitti kridatvena kilam jagat sapashyan satatam yukto jivan mukto na samshayaha. Verses 6 and 7. This only is the manifestation of the object of meditation in the meditator's mind, that the aspirant with a resolute will has the realization of his identity with that object of meditation. This alone is the acquisition of ambrosia leading to immortality. This alone is the realization of the self. This alone is the initiation of liberation leading to identity with Shiva. Ayamevo dayastasya dhyayasya dhyayi chetasi tadatmata samapatti richata sadhakasya ya. Iyamevamrita praptir ayamevatmanograha iyam nirvana diksha cha shiva sadbhavadayini. Section 3. Vibhuti Spanda. Verses 1 and 2. As the sustainer of this universe, Shiva, when eagerly entreated with desire, accomplishes all the desires abiding in the heart of the embodied yogi who is awake after causing the rise of the moon and the sun, so also in dream, by appearing in the central nadi, madhye, does he surely reveal always and more vividly his desired objects to him who never desists from his zealous prayer. Yate chabhyartito dhata jagratortan hridi stitan somasuryodayam kritva sampadayati dehina tatha swapne pyabhishtartan pranayasyanati kramat nityam sputattaram madhye stito vashyam prakashayet. Verse 3. Otherwise, the creative power of the divine, according to its characteristics, is free in manifesting always all kinds of things usual and unusual to the yogi also, both in waking and dream states, as is the case of the common people of the world. Anyatha tu swatantra syat srishtisthadharmikatvata Satatam laukikatsyeva jagrat swapna padadvaye. Verses 4 and 5. Indeed, just as a thing which in spite of all the attentiveness of the mind is perceived indistinctly at first, appears more distinctly later when observed with the strenuous exercise of one's power, so when the yogi resorts to the power of spanda, then whatever thing, yat, actually, paramarthena, exists in whatever form, yena, in whichever place or time, yatra, in whichever state, yatha, that thing, tat, becomes at once, nachirat, manifest in that very way, tata. Yathai arto sputo drishta savadhane pichetasi Bhuyasputattaro bhati swabhalodyoga bhavitaha Tatayat paramartena yena yatra yatha stitam Tattata ballamakramya nachirat sampravartate. Verse 6. Just as a feeble person also, by resorting to that power of spanda, succeeds in doing what has to be done, even so one who is exceedingly hungry overcomes his hunger. Durlabhopi tadakramya yatta karye pravartate achadayet bubuksham cha tatayoti bubukshita. Verse 7. Just as all knowability, etc., in respect of the body occurs when it is pervaded by that Spanda principle, even so, when the yogi is established in his essential self, he will have omniscience, etc., everywhere. Anena dishtite dehe yatta sarvagyata daya tata swatmanya dishtanat sarvatraivam bhavishyati. Verse 8. Just as a plunderer carries away the valuables of the house, even so depression saps away the vitality of the body. This depression proceeds from ignorance. If that ignorance disappears by unmesha, how can that depression last in the absence of its cause? Glanirviluntika dehe tasyascha jnanata sritihi tadunmesha viluptam chet kutta sasyada hetuka. Verse 9. That should be known as unmesha, whence the rise of another thought takes place in the mind of a man who is already engaged in one thought. One should experience it introspectively for oneself. Eka chinta prasaktasya yattasya daparodaya unmesha satu vigneya swayam tam upalakshayet. Verse 10. From this unmesha appears supernormal light, sound, form, taste in a short time to the yogi who has not yet done away with the identification of the self with the body, which however are only a disturbing factor in the full realization of the Spanda principle. Atto vindurato nado rupamasmadato rasaha pravartante chire naiva kshobhakatvena dehina. Verse 11. When the yogi, wishing to see all objects, abides in that state pervading them all, that is, infusing them all with the light of his consciousness, then what is the use of saying much? He will experience for himself the splendor of that vision. Didrikshayeva sarvartan yada vyapyavatishdate tada kim bahunoktena swayameva botsiyate. Verse 12. Observing all objective phenomena by knowledge, that is, by external perception, one should always remain awake, and should deposit everything in one place, that is, see everything as identical with Spanda, which is our own essential self. Thus he is never troubled by another. Prabuddha sarvada tistej jnanena lokya gocharam ekatrarupayet sarvam tattonyena napidyate. Verse 13. Being deprived of his glory by kala, he, the individual, becomes a victim of the group of powers arising from the multitude of words, and thus he is known as the bound one, Pashu. Shabdarashi samuttasya shaktivargasya bhogyatam kala vilupta vibhavo gatta sansa pashu smritaha. Verse 14. The rise in the bound soul of all sorts of ideas marks the disappearance of the bliss of supreme immortality. On account of this he loses his independence. The appearance of the ideas has its sphere in sense objects. Paramrita rasa payas tasya ya pratyayodbhava tena swatantratam eti satcha tanmatra gocharaha. Verse 15. Brahmi and other powers are ever in readiness to conceal his real nature, for without the association of words, ideas cannot arise. Swarupavarane chasya shaktaya sattito tita yatta shabdanuvedena navina pratyayodbhavaha. Verse 16. That aforementioned operative power of Shiva, existing in the bound soul, is the source of bondage. The same, when realized as residing in him as the way of approach to one's own essential reality, brings about success, that is the achievement of liberation. Sayam kriyatmika shakti shivasya pashuvartini bandhaitri swamargasta yatta siddhyupapadika. Verses 17 and 18. Besieged by Puryashtaka, which arises from tanmatras and exists in mind, eye-feeling, and the determinative faculty, he, the bound soul, becomes subservient and undergoes the experiences that arise from it in the form of ideas about certain objects and the pleasure or pain that accrues from them. Owing to the continuance of the Puryashtaka, he, the bound soul, leads transmigratory existence. We are therefore going to explain what causes the extirpation of this transmigratory existence. Tanmatrodaya rupena manoham buddhivartina puryashtakena samruddha staduttam pratyayodbhavam bhunkte paravasho bhogam tadbhavat samsare dataha samsriti pralayasya karanam samprachakshmahe. Verse 19. When, however, he is firmly rooted in that supreme Spanda principle, then bringing the emergence and dissolution of the Puryashtaka entirely under his control, he becomes the real enjoyer and thenceforth the lord of the collective whole of the Shaktis. Yada tvekatra samruddhas tada tasya layodayo niyachan bhoktratam eti tadas chakreshwaro bhavet. Section 4, Verse 1. I pay my homage to that wonderful speech of my Guru, which is like a boat for crossing the fathomless ocean of doubt, and is full of words which yield wonderful meaning. I offer my reverential prayer to Spanda in the form of Paravak, the supreme divine I-consciousness which is full of wonderful transcendental bliss, and which acts like a boat in crossing the fathomless ocean of doubt regarding my essential nature. Agada samshayam bodhi samuttarana vande vichitrartha padam chitram tam guru bharatim. Sadgurnath Maharaj ki jai.